Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next lecture module in CTC 115 Quality Control Laboratory course with me. And this lecture module is going to concern really two things. One called GMP, and the second, which is GLP. So right off the bat, more abbreviations, yay! That's what this class is all about, it seems like, right? So GMP and GLP, I will say this at least before we get started, and these are going to be really somewhat of a review. These are some of the things that we've already talked about, but we go a little bit deeper. We talk about certain regulations, certain things that we can pick out, certain things to watch out for, and we're going to give the manufacturing side of the house its due diligence. So that way we can say, yes, manufacturing, you are just as regulated as a laboratory facility. And that's really what GMP and GLP stand for. So with that said, we're going to go directly into some of the lecture material stuff. It's going to be quite boring in some cases. I'll go ahead and tell you that. And in that's because it's all these rules and regulations and laws and things that we've got to kind of follow, or we're going to be shut down and out of a job. So GMP and GLP, we're first going to focus on GMP. But before we do that, I want to go and kind of define each one of these abbreviations. You know they're going to be a question on a test, on a quiz, and so forth. So it's going to be, what does GMP stand for? So the GMP, the G stands for good, and the M is manufacturing, and the P is practice. So manufacturing in this sense is make it. That's what this is all about. So if a company is making a product and that product is going to get to a consumer in some form or fashion, and if it's a particular type of product, then it will fall under certain regulations that we have to make sure that that facility follows, the workers that work in that facility follows. We have to document it. We have to prove that we're doing what we say that we're doing, and we have to prove that we make a quality product. That's really what this thing is all about. So good manufacturing, this idea that a company is making something that will eventually get to a consumer. These are regulated. They have federal regulations that are tied to them. And you're going to find a lot of these in Title 21 CFR. So CFR's Code of Federal Regulations. This is not a new thing for us. We know what CFR stands for at this point. Title 21 is where we've kind of always been working in a way, right? We've never really ventured outside of Title 21. And there's two parts here that are very particular to good manufacturing practices. And that's Part 210 and Part 211. So Part 210 and Part 211, that's going to directly concern GMP, good manufacturing practices, or AKA make it. Below, you're going to find GLP. And GLP are some of the things that we've talked about already up to this point. And this stands for good laboratory practices. So there is a concept here that let's say, pharmaceutical company, I'm just going to use that as an example. So we'll say, hey, I work for a pharma company. And the question is, okay, well, are you on the side that makes things and blend things and produce these medications and put them into tablets and put them into bottles and put them into foil packs? If so, you're on the manufacturing side of the house. But within pharma, maybe you're on the lab side of the house, and that is just straight up laboratory work. More sophisticated types of tests go on the laboratory side. A lot of equipment, a lot of instrumentation, HPLC, fancy little tests that we do throughout the day, both on the ingredients and on the finished products at the same time. Or maybe outsourced to a third party, and that company has paid ours money in order to do a job or to do a test for them. So that falls under a different wing. Good laboratory practices do have federal regulations. We've talked about what some of these regulations are going to be. Not going to be surprising that they're there, but this is going to be on finished products and what we call raw ingredients. Now, pharma is not the only company that will have to follow GMP and GLP. There are other companies that are out there. We're just not pharmaceutical driven, and that is it, folks. We dabble into quite a bit of different types of materials. Pharmaceutical is just one of those. So there are federal regulations within the United States, and the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, is again 21 CFR or Title 21 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. And this is a part that we've already talked about, and this is part 58. So this is never going to go away. This is something that we're going to have to follow. We're going to have to pay attention to as long as we are working in a non-clinical laboratory. So the non-clinical lab basically means, well, if you're taking blood from a person, if you're taking urine from a person, those types of situations are clinical labs. You are working with humans, you've got human-like material or some type of sample from a human or a client, and you need to do some of the testing on those types of materials. That is a clinical lab, all right? However, most of us are not going to find ourselves in a clinical lab. Most of us are going to find ourselves in pharmaceutical, environmental, forensics, or something like that. And if so, those are deemed non-clinical. So part 58 is really the part that we pay attention to the most as a graduate of the program and a future employee of a company. However, just to prove a point, I want you to know that good laboratory practices are everywhere that has labs involved. So I'm giving you two of those examples down here at the bottom. So two of those examples are the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and these fall under the wing of Code of Federal Regulations, just like up above, but now we're in Title 40 because Title 21 is Food and Drug Administration. So if we are not working with food or drug, then we are probably not working in the same title or the appropriate title of the CFR. So the EPA is going to show up, and the EPA is all environmental, and the EPA is Title 40, not Title 21. So that's why you're going to see 40 CFR listed for these. And then each one of these are slightly different. These are just two examples. That's all that they are. And these two examples is Part 160 and Part 792. So Part 160, FIFRA, which is the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. So FIFRA, or FIFRA if you really want to be, ooh, right? And then the next one is TSCA, and that stands for the Toxic Substances Control Act, or TSCA. Ooh, that could be another one, right? All right, so those are more abbreviations, yay! But, you know, if we're working in the environmental field, those are going to be appropriate for us. If we're not working in the environmental field, then we probably don't fall or we don't need to pay attention to 160 and 792 unless we're working with those types of substances or those types of materials. So I want you to think of 40 CFR Part 160 as this idea that people spray pesticides and herbicides and stuff all over crops and all over food products, and we end up eating that, right? So Part 160 will go into that concept of we are putting chemicals on food products, and those chemicals are going to be there, and the food is grown within those chemicals or with those chemicals, and we need to test those. We need to make sure that we're not going to poison ourselves. We need to make sure that those concentrations are not terribly high. So an environmental company could go out and take those soil samples or take those plant samples or whatever the case is, bring them into the lab and test them and report on what they find. So those are good laboratory practices, but they fall under the jurisdiction of the EPA and not the FDA, because the FDA does some food and it does some drug and it does some cosmetics, but it doesn't do it all. So the Environmental Protection Agency will come in as well, and they will start taking a look at these pesticides, these herbicides, various chemical compounds that are sprayed or used in agriculture. And 40 CFR Part 792, that is all about the toxics. So those are definitely not supposed to be there. So we want to make sure that if a pesticide was approved back into the 1980s, and that pesticide was used for a number of years, and then the EPA is like, oh, whoops, this causes cancer. Then they take that off of the market, and they want to make sure that that particular component does not get used from that moment on. So I like to think of Part 160 as almost like these are the things that you can use. You just want to make sure they're below a certain level. And then Part 792 is more like, hey, these are things that should definitely not be present, or these are things that are definitely not supposed to be there because they are classified as toxic toxic, and we want to remove those toxic chemicals from our consumer market. So again, just some examples. That's all that this is so far, and that's all that really we're going to go into as far as good manufacturing practices go. All right. So what I want to do, I want to first talk about GMP. And GMP is all about this idea of manufacturing, right? So I'm working for a company and they are making something, and I'm on the manufacturing line and I'm a part of that process. So I'm helping out the manufacturing. I'm kind of making sure that things are working the way they're supposed to work, that the finished product looks the way that it's supposed to look. I want to make sure that two things actually happen here in good manufacturing. And it's also the same thing as good laboratory as well. I mean, they should have the same purposes here. And these two purposes are going to be quality, ding, 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 right up here at the top, and integrity. So quality and integrity are going to have to be present on a finished product. And quality and integrity should be there with these raw ingredients that we're going to be using to make that finished product with, right? It needs to be on both sides of the spectrum. So quality and integrity is what this thing is all about. So here's the story, right? If you go to a store and you purchase something and you bring that item home, well, you probably never question the safety of that product, right? You put your full faith into whatever you purchased, and you are going to give that to your parents, you're going to give that to your brothers and sisters or your children, and also your animals, your pets at home, right? So when I go to a store and I get this, oh my God, the cat's got an outbreak of fleas. Let me go to the store, let me buy some flea spray, and let me bring that flea spray home so I can douse the bejesus out of the cat, right? Okay, well, I never probably stop and think, is this really safe? Right? Should I be using this? Are there things inside of this container that I need to be aware of because it might not actually be good for me? These are the questions that we have to limit, because when consumers begin to question these products from these markets, then all of a sudden we start to see some pushback against those consumers. And the people that are making those products, well, they're in it for a profit. They're in it to sell material so they can make money, so they can pay their employees and keep doing what they're doing and make money at the same time. So it's all about expectations here. And that really is the purpose of GMP. GMP is not to get you to hate the world. GMP is not to get the company to sink in massive amount of time and money, even though it can happen sometimes, in order to get a product that is sellable to consumers. GMP is present because they have your safety in mind. And this is almost like looking over their shoulder, right? This is a way that the government can ensure that these companies are making products that are built with quality, that's built with integrity, and that we don't have to question every single thing that we purchase out in a store. All right. So that is the overall goal of GMP. It might not seem that way, and it might seem like a lot of red tape and a lot of regulations, and it can be, quite honestly, if you're not careful, but that is the role of a GMP environment. All right. So I want to talk about this statement from the FD&C Act, which is the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, Section 502A2B, all right? And this is verbatim the statement that comes from the FD&C Act. I'm just going to read it to you. A drug, all right. Now, this is in regards to pharmaceutical, but I want you to understand that the word drug can be replaced with anything. Right? That word drug can just be any type of product at all. Doesn't matter. So if I'm working for a pharmaceutical company, I'm in there, I'm doing my job. At least I think I'm doing my job the right way. The reason that I'm doing the job the way that I'm doing it is because I'm making sure that this kind of falls suit. A drug shall be deemed adulterated. Okay? Adulterated means, well, you probably shouldn't be taking it. There's contamination in it. It's not pure. There's some impurity there. It could poison you and it could kill you. Anything could be adulterated. A drug shall be deemed adulterated if, quote, the methods used in or the facilities or controls used for. Oh, I'm just going to go ahead and stop for a minute. There's already a couple of major things that are happening here. We're going to be looking at the methods. That is a key word. The methods used in. That means me, right? If I am in there and if I'm manufacturing something, if I'm following some SOPs, SOPs are kind of methods. We want to make sure that those are legit. We want to make sure that we pay close attention to those methods and those SOPs, even on the manufacturing side of the house. That makes sense, right? Or the facilities. That also means that they're going to pay special attention to the facility that is being used to make that product in. You're doing this in a warehouse, they're going to come out and take a look at the warehouse. If you're doing this in a lockdown, pristine environment that is pressurized, temperature controlled, security camera behind closed guy, everybody wears suits from head to toe, someone's going to come out and they're going to take a look at that facility. So the methods that we do in a laboratory or on the manufacturing side, as well as the buildings that we work within, are going to be scrutinized. That's part of it. So the methods used in or the facilities or controls used for the manufacturing, making of, processing, packing, or holding do not conform. All right, so if I'm on the manufacturing side of the house, and I could be, I don't know where I'm going to end up, right? So if I'm on the manufacturing side, they're going to be looking at all of these aspects. They're going to be looking at the manufacturing, so the steps that are needed to blend and mix and process and form it into a tablet if we're working for a pharmaceutical company. Once that gets formed into a tablet, if that's what we're after, then that tablet's going to have to go into a bottle. It's going to have to go into a box. It's going to have to go into a foil packet. It's going to have to go into something. So that's going to be the packing. That also includes the labeling. If it's my job to make sure it's labeled the proper way, what goes on the label? How does the label get applied? Are we making sure that we're double checking that the right labels are going on the right boxes? Because, folks, we don't want green bean cans with a corn label, right? We've already seen that problem. Or holding. What happens after they're made and boxed and packaged? So who keeps them? How long are they there? All of that's going to have to be tracked. All of that's going to have to be monitored. And if any of those pieces do not conform, then you are not following good manufacturing practices. There's a part of this that has to need improvement, right? All right. So the methods used in or the facilities or controls used for its manufacture, processing, packing, or holding do not conform to or are not operated or administered in a conformity with current good manufacturing practices to ensure that the drug meets the requirements of the Act. Right? So this is the GMP piece that we're focused on first. And that GMP, good manufacturing practices. These also get updated. And with that said, I want you to realize that a C, lowercase c, can go in front of GMP. And that stands for current good manufacturing practices. Because they do get updated. We have to make sure that we're following the most recent ones, the CGMPs, not just the GMPs that were written in 1970. All right, so it says to assure that the drug meets the requirements of the act. Okay, great, right? This is their way, the government's way of saying we're going to put something in place with these companies. We want these companies to make products, and we're going to let them choose what they want to make, and we're going to let them choose how they want to make it. But we need to make sure that when they do make something, they have to follow the basic standards. We have to make sure that there's going to be things in place that we want them to strive for and that we want them to meet, because those are the minimal standards that should be happening within the United States when we make these products and sell them to consumers. So there's a couple of areas that they're going to focus on, and the first area is to the product's safety, right? So they're going to want a product to be made, absolutely, go for it. But whatever that product is, it better be safe for a consumer. That makes sense, right? Why wouldn't it be? Oh, we'll find out some of those examples. Next up, we have to pay attention to the identity and the strength of that particular product. So is it what it says it is? And is enough of it there as stated on the label? That is part of what this is all about. So for instance, when I go into a store and I get 200 milligrams of Motrin, which is ibuprofen, then I'm going to make sure, somebody has to make sure, if they're manufacturing those tablets, that they are actually making ibuprofen. Yes, we are. Okay, well, how did you prove it? We need paperwork, we need testing, we need data to make sure that it is ibuprofen. Then the strength of it, well, your label says 200 milligrams in the tablet. Is 200 milligrams actually there? Yes or no? So where's the lab data? Where's the information that helps support that justification that you're doing on that label? So the identity, the strength, is it safe? So is it really just ibuprofen? Did you make sure that you produce this in an environment that limited the impurities of what was going to be there? So that leads us into terms that we are going to focus as quality and purity. Those are also two things that get brought to the table. So yes, we've got ibuprofen. That ibuprofen is pure ibuprofen. There's no or minimal contamination with that at all. We have produced this in an environment that is legit. So we have followed good manufacturing practices, and we can ensure that it is ibuprofen, that it is 200 milligrams per tablet, that it is pure, and we are giving you a tablet that actually does what it's supposed to do, right? Not just stay as a brick inside of your stomach, so that way it never breaks down. I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all, right? But those things could happen. So I don't want you to lose the big picture here. I know that I'm focusing on the drug and the pharmaceutical world, but folks, good manufacturing practices can happen with all of these areas, with the food, the drug, and the cosmetic. So if I am focused in on the FDA, which is right up here at the top, the FD&C Act, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, then all of these systems need to be in place with those particular companies. I just used pharmaceutical as an example, but I could be working for Revlon, and I could be making the next eyeshadow that is going to, take off and make me billions of dollars. And that eyeshadow has to be produced. It is a product. It is a product that's going to get sold to a consumer, and it is a cosmetic. So that world follows FD&C Act. We have to make sure that that product is getting made in a arena that helps ensure the safety, identity, strength, quality, and purity of that particular product. So that way, when a consumer purchases it, it's not going to make them go blind when they put eyeshadow on. That is the overall concept of this. All right. So the food is fair game. You want pickles? Manufacturing, GMP better be in place. So go to Mount Olive, take a look at their manufacturing plant, make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, because I don't want to get some kind of nasty kind of growth in my pickle jar. I mean, good luck if it can survive high salt and high acid content, but still, I don't want something in my pickle jar that when I eat my pickle, it's going to send me to the hospital. Right? Good manufacturing is going to help control this. So food, drug, and cosmetic both. All right. Okay, so with that said, that's where this video is going to end. We're going to pick back up with GMP in the next video, and I'm going to introduce you to something that will probably be revolting and turn your stomach.